Greetings, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all the parts of the world from where all the participants and esteemed experts have joined. We are fortunate to conduct this webinar on a very seminal topic of risk and vulnerability, which is being jointly organized by Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur, and Pierce College, Washington, United States of America. For the introductory remarks of today's webinar, I request Coordinator Dr. Supriya David to kindly take over.
Good evening, everyone, joining us from different parts of the world. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to this important session of the Disaster Management Lecture Series, a collaborative initiative between Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, India, and Pierce College, Washington, United States of America. Today's session focuses on a topic of vital global significance, risk and vulnerability, a cornerstone in the field of disaster management. Friends, at the outset, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed dignitaries and resource persons, respected faculty members from both institutions, dear students, researchers and professionals, and our technical and organizing teams whose efforts have made this international collaboration possible. A special note of appreciation goes to the leadership of both Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University and Pierce College for fostering this academic partnership that transcends geographical boundaries and promotes the spirit of knowledge exchange and global cooperation. Disasters, whether natural or human-induced, do not discriminate. Their impact, however, varies dramatically depending on the vulnerability of the affected community and the risks inherent in the environment. Understanding what makes communities vulnerable and how risk is constructed and managed is fundamental to developing effective disaster risk reduction strategies. As we experience increasing instances of climate change related events, urbanization, socioeconomic inequalities, and technological hazards, it is more important than ever to approach disaster management not only through emergency response, but through proactive risk assessment and vulnerability reduction. This lecture series is a platform for fostering academic dialogue, cross-cultural learning, and collaborative research by bringing together experts, scholars, and students from India and the United States. We aim to enrich our understanding of disaster management with diverse perspectives and shared experiences. I encourage all the participants to engage actively, ask questions, and reflect critically during the session. Let this not just be a one-way dissemination of knowledge, but a dynamic interaction that leaves us all more informed and better prepared to contribute to resilient and sustainable societies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Without further ado, now I request Ms. Meghna Mandal to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Anant Sontake, to the audience.
Good evening and good morning. Distinguished guests, faculty members, students, and participants joining us from across the globe. It is with great pleasure that I, Meghna Mandal, welcome you all to this international webinar on risk and vulnerability, jointly hosted by Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj, Nagpur University, India, and Pierce College, Washington, USA. Today's discussion brings together two eminent professionals, Dr. Anant R. Sontake and Ms. Lenora Borchardt, whose contributions to the field of fire safety engineering and emergency management have been both profound and inspiring. It is my honor to first introduce Dr. Anant R. Sontake, a trailblazer in the field of fire engineering in India. Dr. Sontake currently serves as professor at the National Fire Service College, Nagpur, an institution governed by the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. He is also the chairman of the Board of Studies in Fire Engineering at Rashtrasant Tukadoji Maharaj Nagpur University. Notably, he holds the distinction of being India's first PhD graduate in fire engineering awarded by RTM Nagpur University. With over 25 years of exemplary service, Dr. Sontake has made significant strides in enhancing fire safety and risk management across multiple sectors, including civil infrastructure, heavy industry, and mining. His journey began at the Bhilai Steel Plant under Steel Authority of India Limited, where he played a pivotal role in the modernization and expansion project, eventually rising to the position of General Manager Safety and Additional Chief Fire Officer. Dr. Sontake's expertise spans firefighting operations, fire detection and suppression systems, electric vehicle fire risk management, and wildlife control. He has served as a technical expert for numerous state governments, Indian railways, and public and private sector undertakings. Internationally, he has collaborated with Forest Steel UK to assess fire and risk protocols within steel industries. An accomplished academician, he has published extensively and serves on the editorial board of the International Journal of Resilience in Fire, Safety and Disasters. For his outstanding contributions, he has been honored with the prestigious Jawahar Award by SAIL. His leadership continues to shape research and development and academic collaboration in the field of fire safety engineering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meghna. It was a very detailed introduction. We are honored to have Dr. Ananta Sontake among us. Now I request Dr. Sontake to deliver his address.
Thank you, Meghna. And good evening, all of you. I think delivering address means I have to start my presentation. Is it right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving the opportunity. And this is our second webinar. I also welcome the Lenora and Sarah ma'am who are there in the meeting right now. Good evening, all. So this is our second webinar. First webinar, we have seen the administrative functioning in the India as well as the USA. Now moving towards the second part, that is the risk and vulnerability. It is very important, and when we extend further, we will go to the next topics like mapping and the how to mitigate those things. But in today's webinar, our focus would be on risk and vulnerability. What does it mean? How it covers? What are the different methodology for the risk assessment and vulnerability assessment? What are the tools available and what challenges we are facing? So I will touch upon some examples and some incidences in Indian perspective as well as the global. And I also expect that our esteemed faculty and the speaker, Mr. Lenora, he also shared the views and some experiences, some examples, some case studies from other part of the world and especially from the USA. So that way, both the students and the participant will get the benefit of this, which is the core objective of this webinar series, that we understand what are the differences between the strategy and experiences as far as the disaster management is concerned. So this is important topic, risk and vulnerability, and oftenly the people are get confused with this. Risk, when we say in terms of the safety aspect, then it's a product of the probability and severity. But in case of disaster management, it is not explained by only these two terms. It's a product of hazards, vulnerability, and exposure. So we need to understand the vulnerability also while understanding the risk, calculating the risk, and how it affects, how it helps in disaster mitigation as well as the preparedness. When we talk about these terms, either risk or vulnerability, it means we are getting prepared ourselves for the disaster preparation, not the management, not the aftermath, but how we can prepare so that the resilience to come, that all the business at normal position, all the function at its normal condition, that will help us by understanding the risk and the vulnerability of special types of hazards, or say different types of disastrous situation. So by definition, you can see it's a probability of harmful consequences or expected losses resulting from the hazards and exposure and vulnerability. And when we say the hazards, it means here we are talking about the disaster. Either it is a man-made or natural disaster. And vulnerability, when we see, it's a critical concept of disaster management that affects how the community experiences and cover for the various hazards. And the risk assessment and the vulnerability, they forms the backbone of effective disaster management strategies, providing crucial insights that helps the communities prepare for and respond to recover from the catastrophic event. By the systematic and analyzing potential threats, identifying who and what might be affected, either is the people or the property or the environment, what is going to affect, and creating the roadmap for the disaster preparedness that can significantly value the human suffering as well as the economic losses to that country or environment at global. By understanding the vulnerability
Sontake sir.
and
Sontake sir, your slides are not visible to the participants. Please switch on the slideshow mode, sir.
Okay.
Fine, sir. Now it seems okay.
Can you see the slides now?
The slides are visible, but if you could keep it in slideshow mode, it would be much better for our participants to view.
What I am doing from
Fine,
my
sir,
side,
fine, sir.
it's in a slideshow mode right now.
No problem, sir. Please continue. Please continue, sir.
I think you are not getting that view of the slideshow.
No,
Dr.
sir.
Sontake, this is Dr. Miller, and we're seeing your second screen. We're seeing the one with the slide layout and not with the presentation.
Okay. Can you see my next slide right now?
We see the one that says risk and vulnerability.
No, this then you are not able to see my presentation. I think it's not properly shared. Let me check. Can you share? See now?
We see the same view now. As long as you advance through those slides, we'll be able to see them. We can just see whichever slide you are clicked on in the slide sorter on the left.
Actually, I wanted to share entire screen, but that is not happening. I shared my PPT with Supriya madam. Madam, can you share it from your side? I shared. Supriya madam, I have shared my PPT.
अच्छा उसके थ्रू जो लाइसेंस कौन सा बना है बड़े लोग लैंड में लाके कौन मिले हुए कौन भाई
Requesting all the participants to stay on mute. Requesting all the participants to stay on mute. Thank you. We are sorry for the inconvenience that is being caused. Kindly stay patient.
I have shared this PPT with Supriya madam. If she can share that from her side.
Uh,
Would you like Ms. Borchardt to continue on, and then we can come back to yours when Supriya has it?
Yeah, that is
fine,
also possible.
No worries. I now request my colleague Meghna Mandal to kindly introduce our second speaker. Miss Meghna Mandal, kindly introduce Lenora ma'am.
Yes, yes. So joining us from the United States, it is my privilege to introduce Miss Lenora Borchardt, Adjunct Assistant Professor and BS Advisor at Pierce College, Washington. Ms. Borchardt brings to this platform a wealth of experience in emergency preparedness, response, and disaster resilience. She holds an MBA from Colorado State University and is currently pursuing her doctoral studies in adult education at the University of the Cumberlands. Her academic journey also includes a bachelor's degree in geography from the University of Wisconsin. Ms. Borchardt's distinguished career in emergency management began with her service as a CPR first aid instructor, emergency medical technician, and firefighter, roles that deeply grounded her approach to risk mitigation. She has held critical positions such as the head of the Radiological Emergency Preparedness Section for the state of Wisconsin and served as the emergency manager for Adams County, Wisconsin. She has been actively engaged in managing and responding to federally declared disasters, and she continues to instruct key FEMA courses both at the state level and at the national platforms such as the Emergency Management Institute and the National Disaster Preparedness Center. In addition to her academic and instructional roles, Ms. Borchardt holds certifications in school safety and is a graduate of FEMA's Basic, Advanced, and Executive Academies. She is also a certified emergency manager through the International Association of Emergency Managers and a master exercise practitioner. Her insights into community resilience, preparedness education, and interagency coordination make her an invaluable contributor to today's dialogue on risk and vulnerability. We look forward to having an engaging and enlightening session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meghna. Lenora ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here today. And I will not even attempt to look at what time it is for all of our folks. What I would like to start with is asking you, this is a participatory session. So I'm going to ask you to take your cell phones, your mobiles, or go into one of your split screens. And if you can grab the QR code with your mobile, or if you would like to go to menti.com, you can take that code from the top of the screen, the 6120-7346 code. And when you go to menti.com, it'll ask you for a code that'll bring you to this presentation. So you can do it either way with your mobile or with your computer. And if you start moving there, I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. So the QR code will come back in another couple slides right before we do the quiz. And the code will be at the top for the next couple of slides. All right. So risk, as we start to look at risk, we look at overlapping issues. The first issue that we look at really is the hazard. As you can see here, defined the potential occurrence. So what you're looking at is a natural, human-caused or technological event or incident that can cause damage or loss. So that's very straightforward. It's the thing that causes the problem. Our vulnerability and our exposure are things that tend to get people a little more confused. So as we start to look at exposure, those are our abilities to be affected by the hazards. So as was mentioned in my very fine introduction, thank you very much, ma'am. I worked with a nuclear power plant program, which is called REP, Radiological Emergency Preparedness, in the United States. I live about 400 miles from a REP plant. If I'm in that area, if I'm in my home, I'm not experiencing much exposure to a normal technological failure of mechanical engineering parts. If I'm within 10 miles of that, I have a much higher exposure to that particular risk. It's the difference between living near or being near the hazard or being remote, farther away from it. So it's the degree of exposure that you have to the hazard. And then your vulnerability is your ability to be affected by the hazard. And there's lots of factors to a vulnerability. And as we start to think about how all of these come together to become part of risk, we have to understand the different elements of risk and what we can control. I can't control where somebody has sited a nuclear power plant. And a lot of times we can't control that people are actually going to live nearby. So we can't, sometimes exposure is difficult to control. But a lot of times we will look at vulnerability. And how people choose to be in the environment with these different hazards is the context around which their perception of risks and how they're going to manage their risk. If I live near a nuclear power plant, am I going to be concerned about it as a hazard where I have a bug out bag of materials to take with me in case of an incident? Do I stockpile potassium iodide in my home in case I get a radiological exposure? Or do I not understand the level of risk that's there or have faith? So that context of how you live in that environment shapes your perception of risks and your management and preparedness of that risk. And how you do that differs by your experience and your region. All of those are wrapped up then in determining how vulnerable you are to the disaster. So I promised that we were going to be doing a little something together, and we are going to take a quiz. So if you weren't able to grab the QR code before, it is available again here for you to grab, or the code again is up at the top. And I'd like to go ahead and start with our small 3-question quiz. All right. So there we go. Look at all of you coming in. All right, let's go ahead and start our quiz. All right, which situation represents the highest amount of risk? A major city built on an active fault line with strict building codes and earthquake drills? A rural village in a poor country located in a floodplain with no early warning system? Or a region with no history of natural disasters? Let's see what we got. All right. Well, terrific. Let's move forward. A good chunk of you got answer B, which was the correct answer. And the reason for that is going back to our first slide. risk equals hazards plus exposure, plus vulnerability. So we saw that people were living in a floodplain, an area that regularly floods. So they both had a flood hazard and exposure to that being nearby that flood in the floodplain. And their vulnerability was wrapped around the fact that they had no warning system. So vulnerability makes that rural village more at risk than the other ones. So let's go forward again and try our next question. All right, back to my 11 people. Cool, here we go. All right, which of the following statements is true? A low probability hazard is not a concern. If people are aware of a risk, they will always take steps to reduce it. Two communities facing the same hazard can have very different levels of vulnerability, or risk is only about physical damage. All right, we had some different answers there too. This third one here, C, is our answer. Let's go forward and talk about that for a second. And this is because vulnerability includes social and economic factors. So one of the easiest things for us to control is vulnerability. We have to help people understand and to create, oh my goodness, what just happened here? Somebody took presentation.
Sontake, sir, I request you to. Thank you, sir.
Can people still see my presentation?
It's a white screen right now.
Okay. Somebody took presentation mode. Let me go.
Yeah.
And please take your time at ease. No worries.
So we're seeing your screen, Lenora, but now we're seeing your WebEx screen.
All right, present.
There we
Better?
are. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. I lost track of where I was. Sorry. Vulnerability includes social and economic factors. So our perception of risk is an important part. We sort of started touching on that. People have to understand and validate true risk. One of the things that I like to tell my students is that
एक बार इसकी जो बदमा में तारीख दिखा है ये लो चल 80 वो कालो कर लो
Participant, please stop your audio.
I'll mute them, sir. Ma'am, please continue.
I think you will have to unmute Ms. Borchardt. I think she got muted as well.
Ma'am, I'll do it, ma'am. Please wait.
okay. I think I'm back now, right? Terrific. One of the things that I ask my students is, do they feel that they are more at risk on a long-term drive or within 5 miles of their homes? And most of the time they'll come up with their perception of risk is that a long trip, because they're going outside of an area that they know and that there's that they're unsure of, is a higher risk than being within 5 miles of their house, but statistics show otherwise. So that understanding of risks and having data behind what the risk is and how to validate it, and then understanding the vulnerability are the two factors that help create movement in vulnerability. So those social and economic factors we're going to come back to in just a second, but I'd like to go ahead with our third quiz question here. All right. All 11 of you are back. Thank you for participating. True or false? The most hazardous places are always the most dangerous. All right. So let's go forward. And that is actually false, because the hazard does not equal the risks. The elements of preparedness and mitigation can help you manage living in a high hazard area. This background picture is actually a picture of a place in Indonesia where they have high amounts of flooding. And what they've done to manage their risk is to use plants. So you can see the trees and the green that's out there, and the terracing to manage holding and allowing the water to, in an engineered way, in a purposeful way, move through the environment so that people can live and grow the crops that they need to in that area without having the devastation of floods going through. So preparedness and mitigation can manage that high hazard level if you employ those strategies. So we had some folks who did excellent, and I want to thank you all for participating. Ooh, look at all that. Moving all over. All right, Bill, you're our big winner today. But as you think about those questions, this wasn't as much to think about as a true competition. I have nothing to give you other than some reflection here on as you think about the answers that went through, what kind of answers surprised you and why, and how do you perceive risk with that? And I think that this is something that's an important part of us as emergency management professionals, as students, is to help us understand risk so that we can help our communities understand risk. Because understanding risk is the key to moving forward with helping people address their vulnerabilities. And that's where we can make the most change in our community's levels of preparedness. So this is a really excellent kind of chart here that gets around where you can make the movement to make the changes. And the big thing there, you're not going to change the fact that it floods in the United States and India. We get floods, everybody does. You can somewhat change exposure, but the biggest thing is to be able to change vulnerabilities. So helping people understand their risks with data, and then helping so that they have a data-informed risk perception, and then helping them look at the different components that they can employ based on their level of capability. So we know that you, by understanding your exposure, and you do that through the data here, the measurement data, right? Observations, computer models, your age groups by blocks, etc. So that's understanding that it could also be by economics. As we look at here at sensitivity, things like your income, if change your ability to, for example, evacuate in the face of a tropical cyclone or a hurricane, because you probably have independent means of transport, such as a car, with the more wealth that you have. People who are lower on the socioeconomic scale probably are looking at public transportation, which may or may not be able to be activated and moved in time to move people. So your ability to recognize and receive warning, to understand it and process it, has to do with being a very young, very old people have a harder time with recognizing and processing warnings, but also having people with different kinds of disabilities. I have a hearing disability. I have a cochlear implant. And if I'm not wearing my implant, my ability to hear warnings is decreased. So people with different kinds of needs also have that sensitivity to being able to independently manage the risk that's in place. And those things, the exposure and the sensitivity, come together to look at their adaptive capacity. So understanding the message, being able to move through the fear, the psychological impacts, looking at having a network and a community that validates your perception of risk. Because if I have children that I'm concerned for, the next generation, if I'm concerned and tied into my community, if I have community connections, that's actually the strongest motivator to taking those elements of warning and moving forward with a protective action, such as a shelter in place or an evacuation. So all of these come together to be that element of vulnerability, and by connecting people to the community, by recognizing we have people with adaptive needs, by recognizing that we have people with economic needs, all of those things coming together, making sure that they have quality data to be able to recognize the problem and verify it. Most adults are not just going to take your word that you should evacuate. They're going to want to look at a weather map. They're going to look at an independent source, and they're going to connect with their personal community. So making sure that you're embedded with those people and you're connected with the community as a trusted source all become part of how you move people and move vulnerability to that positive, where they're prepared, they've mitigated, and they're willing to employ those strategies to manage the risk of the hazards that come at them. So I know we have we have another esteemed speaker going to be speaking. So I want to leave with providing you with some resources. Some of these resources that can help you as you design your community programs are risk assessment tools, understanding the levels of risks that are around for each of your hazards. And I provided some of the American sources that we use. So ASPR Tracy has HVA's hazard vulnerability assessments and risk assessment tools available. FEMA has the National Risk Index, which is a map tool that shows you by community, not just the risk of the hazard itself, but also social vulnerabilities and economic impacts. So those are there. There's also our international planning frameworks. And then the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction has a Stop Disasters game. And gaming, which I use today, is a way to engage people in understanding risk. So I provided that so that you could take a look and help people understand by playing a game, something that's enjoyable, instead of nagging them, which is not enjoyable, about risk and how things that they do by getting warnings, by planting plantings, by putting in rocks. Those kinds of things can help to mitigate the hazards. And it's a game that they can play for multiple different hazards. And then there's some free training available. I'm going to take these and put them as hyperlinks. I've got a document with them all hyperlinked. I'll put them in the chat so that you can access them. They'll be in a Word and a PDF file. Both files are exactly the same. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and see if there's anything in the chat. And there doesn't appear to be, so I will back away and listen to our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lenora ma'am. We'll have the Q&A session after Dr. Sontake has delivered his lecture. Is the presentation visible to everyone?
Yes, the first slide is visible.
Sontake sir, I'll share it on your behalf. You kindly continue speaking, sir. It will be easier for you.
Please share from your side so that I can go along with the slides.
Just give me a minute.
Is it visible? No.
Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible. Next. Next. So, thanks, Lenora madam, for elaborating the and touching the many aspects which I wanted to deliver, so that made more easy, and you also made it interesting by having the quiz session, making it more participative. Coming to the next slide. Next. So these are the key. I will go a little bit detail or the explain this terminology basically, because we have to understand this vulnerability and the risk by having the examples and the data. How we can predict, how we can get prepared well for the disaster. So that will help you understand this terminology as well as its concept. So when we say the vulnerability, it has some key dimensions like physical vulnerability, which relates to build the environment, including the housing quality or infrastructure resilience, mainly after disaster when it will be located, whether it will be the hazardous area or the disastrous area. Then social vulnerability, it focuses mainly on the factor like the poverty or the age, gender or the disability, family structure, social networks that affects the people ability actually to prepare for or to recover after the disaster. Then economical vulnerability, that involves the considerations of the income level, livelihood, diversity, savings, and mostly the most important is the insurance coverage, whether this society is having that backup or not. An environmental vulnerability, that refers to the degradation of the natural resources, ecosystem. By having that, we are inviting more disastrous situation by taking out the natural protection against the hazard. Then industrial vulnerability, that reflects the capacity of the governance of the structure to implement the effective disaster management policies and the programs. Institutional vulnerability, that plays important role. Next. This already discussed. I also saying the difference between the risk when we calculated in terms of the safety and in the disaster case. This is the different types of the risk, small scale risk. Again, it depends on the impact it is having on the society or the economy or environment. Next. Next. So these are the key terms which has came into the discussion like hazards and all. But coming to the process, this is important. When we say the process of the risk assessment, there are some key factors. First of all, we have to identify the hazard. And when we talk about hazard, it means that either it is the area is the earthquake prone or flood prone or industrial accidents can happen there. That affects the given area. That we have to identify first. Then analyzing the hazard, that studying the characteristics of these threats, including their frequency, magnitude, duration, and the area to cover. If we take the example of the industries, then we should know what kind of process is there, what materials are getting stored there. So in case of any disasters, what kind of impact it will have on the society or the environment. Then exposure analysis, that identifies the population and the poverty, infrastructure and activities that could be affected by the hazard. Vulnerability analysis, the next process step is assessing the susceptibility of exposed and elements to damage or the disruption. Then risk estimation, combining hazard, exposure and vulnerability, all three, which gives the information to calculate the potential losses. And now coming to the last one, that is the risk evaluation, which determines whether these potential losses are acceptable or require some intervention. So with these steps, we can go for the risk assessment. Next. So there are two methodologies for vulnerability and the risk assessment. One is the quantitative assessment approach, and another is the qualitative and the participatory approach. So when we say the quantitative, that assessment is rely heavily based on the data and the statistics analysis to measure the vulnerability and calculate the risk. And this is one of the challenge, because getting the data is really difficult. So when we say the indicators based on the assessment, it means using the measurable variables like poverty rate and the building quality in that area to create the vulnerability indices. When we say the data regarding the probabilistic risk modeling, it means it applies the statistics techniques to estimate the likelihood and the potential impact of disaster events. Then cost-based analysis, it evaluates the economic efficiency of risk reduction, measures by the comparing their cost and to expected benefit in terms of the avoided the losses. The GIS-based analysis is a mapping and the analyzing the geographic distributions of the hazards, vulnerability, population, critical infrastructures, and the environment in that area. Next. And these approaches provides the numerical estimation for the facilitating the giving the disaster risk reduction. And now coming to the next method, that is the qualitative and the participatory method. This method emphasizes basically on the live and experiences and the perceptions of the vulnerable communities. When we say the community vulnerability assessment, it means engaging the local residents and in identifying their vulnerabilities and capabilities and prioritizing for their risk reduction. When we focus on the group discussion, gathering the insight from the different democratic group and their specific vulnerability and the coping strategies, and then VCA, that is vulnerability and the capacity analysis. This is a participative tool that helps the communities identify their vulnerability and develop the action plans addressing to them. And historical some disaster analysis, examining the past disaster. If happens, then understanding the patterns of that particular disaster in that area. Next. So vulnerability, you can say, is the product as well as the process. It exists both. When we say the product is a condition for that particular instance, and when we say the process, it's a dynamic process that evolves over time. Slowly it happens. So when we say the product, it means it's the current states of the susceptibility is harmful. And for example, when we are doing the mapping for the location of the elderly residents, if the old age people are residing there, then in emergency, we have to have the planning to evacuate them. When we are saying the next is the linkage of the assessment to the sustainable development. This effective vulnerability reduction requires the interaction, and there are some efforts to make the poverty elevation, and these are some governed by the governance. Next. So these are the drivers for the vulnerability. These are self-explanatory: climate change, poor governance, and the environment, which make it more challenging. Next. Risk reduction strategies, like shifting the, now this is very clear, now we are shifting from the disaster management to the disaster risk management reduction, and avoiding the new risk by having the proper its perception and reducing the existing ones as well as the avoiding the new risk. Next. So risk reduction strategies. So these are very common things. So we can move ahead because of the time constraint. This PPT will be available. Next. So impact of the disaster. This is important aspect, and it's having the serious impact on the social, economical, and the political, as well as the health. And health which increases the diseases spread and the pressure of the healthcare system. If the healthcare system is not capable to handle this kind of situation, so that may collapse, and which again increase the number of casualties and can convert it in the pandemic also. Then psychological, the trauma, the social fragmentation, and the challenges are there, community challenges. Next. So these are some strategic developments for the vulnerability reduction. When we say the community involvement, we have to empower the local population in decision making. Capacity building, we have to train the communities and institutions in disaster preparedness. Policy development for the risk sensitivity and the legislations and enforcement and mechanism. The policies are there, but if we are missing the enforcement, then it will not work in case of the disaster. Technological integration, like earlier we discussed regarding the GIS mapping and the predictive modeling and real-time data, that helps to take the decision during the disaster also. And sustainable practices, we have to address the root cause, and like poverty or the resources mismanagement, why it is happening or why it has happened in earlier incidences. Next. So there are challenges when we say the risk and the vulnerability. So these are the challenges for the handling the vulnerability. Data, I emphasized earlier also. This is the biggest challenge to getting the data for the future forecasting or for the preparedness, but getting the real data is really challenging. Next. Then addressing the emergency risk like climate change, when alerting the hazardous patterns and creating the new threats that may exceed the historical experiences. Rapid urbanization, this is again one more emerging risk, concentrating the population and assets to the potential hazardous area in spite of having the hazards like the industrial hazards or the any earthquake zone in that area. But since the rapid urbanization, the people are moving, getting eccentric to that area, and then the chances of the casualties or the life risk getting increased. Then technological dependencies, creating the new vulnerabilities and relate to the infrastructure or failure or cyber threats. Nowadays we are depend on that, on technology. Communication, if it fails, then everything stops. And complex emergencies, may not be of of one kind. It can be the mixture of 2-3 emergencies. Next. So lastly, we can say the vulnerability and the risk assessment provides the foundation for the disaster management. But by understanding the vulnerability and both the product and the process, this assessment can be informed the immediate protective measures, and while also addressing the root causes through the sustainable developments and initiatives. So with this, by having the understanding of the risk and the vulnerability, we can plan better for the disaster preparedness and forecast the challenges and get prepared for that. Next, I think this is the last slide. Thank you. So we can invite some questions.
Kindly post your questions in the chat box if you have any.
Hi, I see a hand. Is there somebody coordinating the questions, or are we doing that ourselves? I don't want to step on someone's toes.
There is no one writing in the chat box. Those who are interested to ask the questions may please unmute and ask their question.
Thank you.
Angad ji, you want to ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Please go on.
So I have two questions. One is for Lenora and one is a common question for both Lenora and Sontake. The first question is, what are the strategies for managing hazard levels in US? And the second question is data perception and action based on the data perceived, the only necessary steps there is to deal with vulnerability. If not, what are the other steps?
Angad ji, you were not properly audible. Could you please type in your question in the chat box? Thank you. There's a question for the experts. What is the significance of hazard analysis and risk assessment related to petrochemical plants? Anurag is asking the question.
Shall I answer? Respond?
Please, sir. Please, sir.
Yes, Anurag, you are asking about the hazard identification and the risk assessment in particularly in for the petrochemical industry. This is your question, am I right? Okay, you have all mentioned in the chat box. So
Yes,
here
that's
when
my
we are
question.
talking about the risk, yes, when we are talking about the risk in terms of the disasters, it's a product of the three things: exposure, vulnerability, and the hazard. But when we talked about in terms of the safety or industrial safety, then the risk is the product of probability and severity, and hazard are all those things when we are talking about the hazard identification. So let us take an example of the fire hazard. So in that case, hazard means all that thing which can catch fire or which can explode. So when we do the HIRA or the hazard identification risk assessment, it's not analysis, it's assessment. When we do the assessment, it means it's quantitative analysis. We are coming to certain figure, certain number for that area. So when we identify the hazard, so with that we find the risk, probability and severity. Probability. Please unmute. So take a suppose it's Divansh, please mute. Divansh, please mute. Host, if you can mute him.
Sir, please carry on with your answer, sir. Sorry, sir.
Okay. Suppose we have identified the hazard as a gas. If it is stored or the chemical, it's a petrochemical industry which handles the gas will as well as the chemical or the oil, you can say. So suppose we have identified the gas pipeline, that is hazard. Now coming to the risk. Risk means what are the chances of that gas to explode or to catch fire. Suppose you are carrying some hot work on that gas pipeline which is charged. So we have to do the HIRA for that job first. So while doing the HIRA, we have identified the hazard. Now coming to the risk. Risk being possibility and the severity. The probability and the severity. The severity would be an explosion. So we normally rate it on the 1 to 4 scale. Suppose if fatality happens, it is then considered as the 4 severity. If small injury or the injury with the first aid or injury with the say some disability happens, then it is rated at 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, and fatality is for a 4. So if there is a gas explosion, it can brings the fatality. So in that case, severity is a 4. But what is about the probability? Probabilities depend upon the history of that area. So we can take the data of that particular industry which is located, or we can take the data of that organization. Suppose that organization is having the 4 or 5 plants in the country, so we can take the data of the other plants also, or we can take the data of the plants of the similar nature worldwide. So these are the different probability. So if the incident happen in the same industry at the same location, then it is considered as the maximum probability, say probability 4. So now the probability is 4, severity is 4, because if it's a gas, if the explosion happens, the fatality can occur. So 4 into 4 is the 16. So now here the risk is maximum, that is 16. So you are quantifying the risk in terms of the number figure. So this is how you calculate the risk for that particular hazard in petrochemical industry. So this is the example related to your specific query or question.
May I also jump in just a small amount here? One of the other ways that we look at, we have, so I will need some help from someone. I have a couple of documents which the program won't allow me to attach them to the chat. It says that there's a control board, but I can't find it. One of the things that I will also add on is that that there's another way to look at quantifying risk. So something like a Likert scale, which the doctor was discussing before, gives you that kind of relative risk. One of the other tools that we use in the United States is looking at resource-based. So if the bad thing starts to happen, we create a contextualized risk assessment that we call the THIRA, which is the Threat and Hazards and Incident Response Analysis. So what that does is we pull together our planning committee, our planning team of people who are looking at community risk. They're contextualizing it, which is like if any of you are in operations, in field operations like fire or law enforcement, you create an incident action plan to do a job. This is and you do that around a real event or incident that's happening in front of you. We do this also for the THIRA SPR, which allows us to create a planning scenario that we can all agree to. And instead of looking at just comparative risk, which we would also do, we also look at if the bad thing happens within our degrees of tolerance, what are the resources that we need? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these discussions about risk are about being able to deal with the risk. So on the one hand, we're looking at preparing our populations through mitigation and preparedness activities, but we're also looking at preparing our responders and ensuring that we have the right resources available should the thing happen, should the mitigation fail, should the incident come to pass. So we look at a resource-based contextualized assessment that helps us determine what the scenario would be. So instead of having an incident action plan, we have kind of a planning plan with a contextualized scenario that lets us determine, create a planning scenario that allows us to determine what the resources would be needed for that, so that we can ensure that we have, if not our own resources available, we've created agreements and purchasing contracts, contingency contracts, etc., so that we have a smorgasbord, a buffet, where the incident commanders have a plan that says, here's the things that we've set up for the incident that we could predict on this contextualized risk assessment. So there's two kinds of risk assessments that we do. One is to give us the comparative, and one is to give us to help us do our action planning. Thank you for letting me jump on.
Ma'am, there's one more question for you. Angad Patnaik is asking the question: what are the strategies for managing hazard level in the United States?
So we look at our mission areas in emergency management. We look at mitigation, and then we look at our throughput, which is preparedness. Preparedness, according to our national preparedness system, is planning, organizing, which is our staffing, equipping, training, and exercise. It's called POETI, is the acronym that we use. So we look at every hazard and we apply the elements of, is our plan ready? That could be everything from agreements to the actual emergency operations plan, our mitigation planning. So we look at all of those elements. Do we have the adequate staffing? Are we properly equipped? Have we trained and have we exercised? So those are our preparedness elements that we use, and it flows on that THIRA SPR contextualized risk assessment that we use. We don't do that risk assessment for every hazard. It's a very, very long process, and it's fairly resource intensive. But we do it for usually the top 3 to 5 hazards that we look at, because honestly, when you do this as a position, you know that if you are doing mass care, so you're opening a shelter, for example, and caring for people who've been evacuated, most of the time it doesn't matter too much whether they were evacuated for a flood or a tornado or a hurricane or tropical cyclone. What matters is that they have shown up at your doorstep with their stuff, in a bag, and need food and housing and toileting and showering in those facilities. So by the time you've done it for 3 to 5 hazards, you've met most of the mission areas that we have to accomplish and be prepared for. So the Likert scale assessments, which I will provide you in that document, help you determine which are the ones that are the most complicated in your area, and then the THIRA SPR helps you dig down into those to make sure that you have all of the, if you have 10,000 people, how many people would that be in shelters? And how many shelters have you assigned? And how many staff would that take? How much food would that take? So it helps you plan down to make sure that you've met your POETI. So that's on the preparedness side, and that's an emergency management and partner function. And that's I saw one of the other questions is how do you get partners involved? And that's how we get our partners involved, is in that preparedness element. The other element is in mitigation. Right now in the United States, that's in flux. We have had a program called Pre-Disaster Mitigation, where the federal government has provided money to fund mitigation elements. So that's looking at where you have the ability to target funding to reduce the risk in the future. So if I have culverts in my road that keep blowing out every time we have a flood, instead of continuing to put the same undersized culverts in, we'll do the environmental study, we'll do the engineering studies, and we'll buy the right product once it's blown out and fix it for real, so that we don't continue to have that nickel and diming us to death with spending small amounts of money that don't make sense. The problem with that program was that it perpetuated structural disadvantages among our economically disadvantaged and historically marginalized communities. So we created a new program called BRIC, Building Resistant Infrastructure and Communities. And that looked at the scale of the, because mitigation was always built on a cost effectiveness basis, had to meet a cost benefit analysis. What that did was perpetuate inequities and put money into places where people had more money. If my house was only worth $100,000, it was probably not going to be worth mitigating it because it couldn't pass the cost benefit analysis. So I mitigated people with more economic resiliency, and the poor people who had been shifted into those areas because they didn't have strong jobs, and so they had to buy home housing in economically disadvantaged areas because that's all they could afford. Those people had the highest needs, but they were left out of the programs that provided them the most money and assistance. So BRIC looked at sliding scales across the country to look at who got the money and how we ended up helping those people who were traditionally disadvantaged with mitigating, because they tended to live in the most risky areas because of structural inequalities. That program has been suspended by this current administration, and we're unsure if additional federal funding will be coming. At this point, the states and local municipalities are not generally funded in a way they don't tax to fund in that way because it's always been a federal prerogative. So we're unsure where that's going to go. There are other smaller, less expensive mitigation elements. And as communities, states are building roads and things like that, they will certainly look at mitigation elements in it. But most of the way that we create resiliency in the United States is preparedness, both as responders and emergency communities, and preparedness with our public and our communications and outreach programs and education for the public, and then mitigation by funding primarily infrastructure improvements to increase resiliency. Did that get what you were looking for?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the elaborate explanation, ma'am. The next question is to sir and ma'am. I suppose both of you can answer 50-50 kind of a thing so that we have a glimpse of India and US as well. How do you coordinate with other agencies or organizations to address vulnerabilities?
I think I covered some of that in our preparedness activities and meetings is the main way we bring people in. So risk assessment is not done by the emergency manager as a planning function. It's done as a facilitation within planning. So I don't sit down and have my staff independently do these things. They are well aware of their community. They understand the kind of tools that the doctor was showing you, and they bring those to the work groups. But part of what we do is bring constituents, both from the public and from our expert organizations and our emergency response organizations together to have these discussions so that they can negotiate and agree what that view is for the community on their assessments. So providing them access and information and responsibility throughout the process helps to keep our partners involved. So that happens in everything from assessment through our planning, our training, and our exercises. It's a whole community approach.
Thank you, ma'am. There's a question by Rohan.
Here just I would like to one or 2 points. So when we say the coordination, so it's a coordination amongst in India perspective, the coordination amongst the different agencies who are designated for the handling the hazards like NDRF, NDMA, and state services, emergency services, fire services, and other emergency services, medical as well as the coordination between the NGOs, which also plays a very important role. And there are NGOs who are doing well in particular sectors. Some NGOs are working in the protection of the environment. Some NGOs are working in the fields of the health. So this coordination happens, and they also have the regular exercise for practicing to address this risk and vulnerability.
Thank you, sir. There's a question by Rohan Ghogre. I'm sorry. Should more focus be given to reducing risk or enhancing coping capacity?
It's a very interesting question. So it is always to reduce the risk is the best option, best choice, or rather I will say the first choice. If not, then surprises will be there. So we have to build up our capability to coping or to face those kind of situations. So primarily our focus should to reduce the risk, known risk, similar kind of risk which has happened earlier and having the history, and having the better preparation than earlier for that particular level of risk.
There's a question for both of you, sir and ma'am, by Angad. Is data perception and action based on data perceived the only step there to deal with vulnerability? If not, then what are the other steps? Lenora ma'am, could you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
I wanted to think through that for just a second. Thank you for that question. I think that as you look at this, understand we have to deal with the data perception. Most of the time when I'm looking at working with, definitely with the public, I have to deal with their perception. We have so many tools at our disposal that people never had before. I was at our College of Emergency Management run by FEMA called the Emergency Management Institute. You are a very accomplished professional if you get to go to that institute. And I was there at one of our top academies, our executive academy, and we had a tornado warning. And I went downstairs, and in that warning, because that warning tells us that there's an imminent threat that we need to be aware of. And only about half the class had calmed down, and everybody, when I got there, was looking on their telephone at the weather map because most of them were emergency managers. I was one of the few people with a weather degree, but they were all looking to see whether they should stay or not based on the tool in their pocket. Because we've given people so much data and so many tools, everybody has a field of expertise now, but that is happening at the same time that we are actually becoming more segmented in our knowledge and actually experts in our bubbles, but we have tools into so many other areas of expertise that we have this misimpression that we are experts in a broad range of fields. So when you get to the public and you have people who see so many weather maps and they've heard the weatherman talk a couple of times, now they feel they're experts and they're looking to confirm the perception that they have. And that's why we kind of talked about and why I mentioned that connection to your community and that connection to us as emergency managers is critically important, because they have to see us as true experts that they can validate, because then their expertise becomes relying on us as experts as opposed to being independent. I think when you're looking at other things like programs for mitigation, where we're looking at putting money into infrastructure, that becomes much less emotional and less tied with our personal egos in a psychological sense. And so that becomes more data driven, because we're looking at the numbers of that and we're looking at the cost of that. So I think it depends on the program that you're at and understanding the nuances of the programs and what motivates the audience becomes important. Some people are more logical thinkers and are motivated by data. Others are by emotion, but even people that are data thinkers link their ego to their logical thought. So you have to appeal to broad sectors of the population. You have to put out messages, and you have to deal with programs that touch them all in the way that they're going to be motivated and respond to.
Sir, would you like to add anything to ma'am's?
Yes, Lenora madam has explained very well. I would like 1 or 2 points there. Definitely, these are important parameters, data perceptions, and the data having the implementing the solution for it. But these are not only the two options we have, only 2 steps. Beyond that, definitely the very important is the awareness and the education. The community awareness is very much important about the vulnerability and the risk of their area. Accordingly, we can build up the capacity by giving them the proper training all the time. Similarly, policy formulation is very important. Legislative frameworks which creates a law which regulates that, to having the resilient building in that area, to follow the all precautions and the mandatory procedures while making the new infrastructure in that area. And most important is the resilience building. So these are the some factors or the parameters. These are options are available other than the data perceptions.
There's a next question which is related to our current usage of technology, that how can we use technology in enhancing risk assessment processes, and are there any specific innovations we should be aware of?
I think that as we look at technology, there's definitely system improvements in modeling and collection. I'm middle-aged, but I remember as a child having to spend hours in the basement for tornado warnings, and now we can get down to the neighborhood as we start to move into the event. So that's based on our ability to collect information and our ability to process that information quickly. So our computing technology, our speed has gotten up, our ability to store and process has gotten up. So those are all important. We also have better communications technologies between us as responders and the public, and multimodal systems to get information out. I think social media is a big element of that. And while it's not new, the new part for us is trying to figure out how to manage mis and disinformation among people who are trying to draw attention or who are, frankly, speaking out of turn, speaking as an expert on an element that they have no knowledge about. And then I think you're also seeing some great advances in things like earthquake technology. We don't do it much in the United States. The United States always has an opt-in culture, but you can see, for example, in Japan, every mobile phone has an accelerometer in it, and they link those phones, and that data is always coming back to the phone companies. They've created programs that as you're getting your initial P waves coming across for your earthquakes, it's recognizing that movement in areas where everybody's got a mobile phone, and it's recognizing that signature and automatically releasing warnings and notifications to people because the more dangerous waves are coming. So there's some great technology like that. In Japan, they have an opt-out culture where people have to say they don't want to be part of it, and they have a stronger community culture than in the United States, where we have a very individualistic culture, where our people would have to opt in, and people generally don't want to feel tracked. So unfortunately, we're more paranoid, and that system doesn't work as well for us, although they have put that technology in California around the San Andreas Fault, and there's probably enough penetration in some areas for that to work. I think we're seeing tsunami warnings, both on the warning side, the data collection, and the modeling side. All of our technology is getting better.
Just to add one or 2 points in Indian perspective, as far as the technology is concerned, mainly IoT based and the GIS system is being used for the remote sensing, and the drone, which is now been used for the surveillance in case of the disaster as well as the aftermath. So these technologies are being used nowadays.
Thank you, sir. Next question is by Aman Yadav. What are the key drivers of systematic vulnerability in economic and environmental systems? I suppose this question is for you, sir, Sontake, sir.
Okay.
We have 2 more questions in line.
I'm also happy to help with that a little bit.
Yeah, please, ma'am. Please.
Okay. Yeah, so economic and environmental systems, in particular, as you're looking at and I'm sorry, I'm not as aware of India. I can talk a little bit about how that is in the United States. In general, our planning and zoning is a vulnerability for us in that in the United States, community services are based on property taxes, and property is how, in general, people, families accumulate wealth and allow them to have social mobility. So there's, as we look at some of the vulnerabilities in our economic system, because we tie services to property taxes. If your property taxes, you want to, as a community, you want to bring in infrastructure, you want to bring in business, and you want to bring in housing that are at a higher level that generate higher amounts of property taxes so that you can improve your community. And those improvements draw more people to the community, creating an upward cycle of economics. That when you put in conditions that cost more money, the cost of building that infrastructure, of bringing that business in, the cost of planning and zoning. So if I want to bring in a mobile home park in my community, and I have these trailers that come in for people to live in, that is low income housing. Those people are not going to pay much tax money, and they don't have much, or they would be living in a higher quality housing, traditional stick frame housing. If you do that, the community loses the land that's built on for higher quality housing. Those people don't pay as much, and it's going to be a drag on your economic mobility, not an improvement. So a lot of places will either zone so that those things can't exist, or they'll zone them in areas of the community where nobody else wants to build infrastructure, wants to build houses, so that you end up putting the poorest people in the poorest areas. So that when you have the disasters, you have no real ability to mitigate. And as I was mentioning earlier, the mitigation program here in the United States requires that the house be worth it to mitigate. And the worth is not based on the ability to house people. The worth is built on its economic ability. As a community, when you look at these things, if you increase your planning and zoning recommendations, you make a mobile home park have tie downs and ground anchors and meet certain requirements for having tornado shelters, that all adds cost to people who are already looking at low income housing. And so either they're priced out of the market, or they're going to go to the next community that doesn't put those additional safety factors into their planning and zoning regulations. So all of these are both existing on a personal scale and a community level scale as you look at these variables. And as these play out in your community, if I just need people living in my community and something is better than nothing, if I have something that is floodplain land, in quotes, garbage land, I can put something on it and develop that. Then I have something there to help drive the economy, as opposed to leaving it open source and that. So as you look at these vulnerabilities, and in the United States, we have an unfortunate legacy of systemic racism, where people from Africa who had been enslaved and brought over in the early parts of our country were put into this poorest amount of housing, this poorest kind of housing. So not only have we done an economic disadvantage to certain groups, but we've reinforced that with racism. And that was part of what that BRIC program was trying to address, was that we had unfairly not just socially marginalized, but actively discriminated based on, in this case, racial qualities, creating perpetualized economic disabilities to people over time. And so that economic and environment are tied, and it's really recognizing that the people who have the least are the people who are going to bear the largest brunt of disasters, unless as a community we choose to invest in those areas and make that housing more safe, like the Indonesian picture that I showed earlier. I hope that gets a little bit to your question.
Yes, just I would like to add 1 or 2 points. As far as the economic vulnerability is concerned, and we have experienced that during the COVID. When you depend on the globalizations or some other country, for that chain breaks, and you will find the more disparity, economical disparity in our country itself, among the society. The people who are weaker section, they are facing to even to get their daily livelihood in the case of disaster. So, economical vulnerability directly affects the supply chains, market vulnerability, unless otherwise you are self-sufficient, your country is self-sufficient, or your region is self-sufficient, or else it will affects badly, and in the within the community also. And when the needs are not getting fulfilled, then the say small terrorism or the corruption also starts. So this is the vulnerability, economical impact it has. And as far as the environment is concerned, when there is extreme weather, either it is the drought or the severe flood, sea level may rise, or the coastal areas, the people they face these issues, environmental issues. So, so these are 2-3 points I would like to just add to that, concern to the economic and the environment.
Thank you, sir. There's a question by Satyam. What are the upgradations that have been done in Sendai framework compared to Hyogo framework?
I could talk a little bit about that. The Hyogo framework, honestly, the disaster risk reduction there through the legal and policy framework, in the United States, we've done a little bit less on that, to be frank. Because of the multi-level nature of our government, the federal government primarily provides technical expertise and funding. So there's less ability to push down a nationalized approach to that kind of risk reduction. It relies on communities primarily, and in some community states. Even states are not the same. Different states are organized under different kinds of legal frameworks, so they may or may not be able to push things down to their local communities. And as I mentioned in my last discussion, local communities are more interested in having people come than putting in barriers through legal frameworks like planning and zoning to keep people out of building areas that are building in areas that are hazards. So they don't go down to the next community that doesn't put those in there. So the United States has not done very much with that. Identification and assessment of risk is going fairly well in the United States. In our university setting, we do have a gap between our emergency managers who do the research and the fields where these people exist doing deep research, and our practitioners. So for us, our problem has been taking that information that's coming out of academia and making our practitioners pracademics, where they understand what that research is and making that available to them. Pretty good in preparedness. I mentioned that our POETI system and our quality THIRA assessment helps us really focus in on preparedness. And innovation and resilience has, I think, tied to a lot of our identification and assessment, as most of that's been done at the universities in modeling. Where one of our biggest gaps is in what we've talked about already today is helping people understand what motivates. Emergency managers are really good at being able to pull data, but they're really bad at understanding the psychological concepts of motivating people to act. And that's some of the work that we need to do. As we've looked at Sendai, that kind of links to that motivation piece and helping people understand disaster risk. I think that we're not exactly there. because we're having to work through issues of mis and disinformation in social media. We're having to deal with people, everybody thinking they're an expert in everything, and in providing messages that that motivate people. Our education for our practitioners tends to be very focused on logic and data aspects, but people are motivated by how they feel. And we've spent a little less time on psychology. So that understanding of risk is not very well developed. Strengthening governance, again, I think that's tied to that one in Hyogo, and we haven't done very well with that. Looking at disaster risk reduction, we were doing very well and also making that equitable and increasing the equity of that until we had the administration change. And right now, we don't know where that's going to end up, if mitigation will continue to be funded at all, or if that's going to fall by the wayside. And then the fourth priority at Sendai, looking at the Build Back Better, we're starting to have emergency managers focus on creating basic recovery plans. For a very long time, we've been tied to response. But in the United States, first responders, police, fire, EMS, they're really responsible. We're support in response phase. Where we take leadership is in recovery and in preparedness and mitigation. And so we're starting to try to course correct our field to start to focus on those areas and let the responders do what they do well, with our ability to facilitate communications, to do alert and warning, and to support the resource acquisition and management in the response phase, but really focus our efforts on recovery, preparedness, recovery, and mitigation. And that means that we're slowly starting to build in that fourth priority of Sendai of building back better, tying mitigation and recovery together. I hope that covered what you were asking.
Yeah. As far as the India is concerned, because primarily Hoyo framework was focusing on the natural hazards, but the Sendai is focusing on the natural as well as the biological or technological hazards also. And it is not only the response to disaster, but moreover it's a risk management. And recently the incident, the disaster we faced, this Feni cyclone, this is a success story of this. What we are following now, the Sendai framework.
Sir, the next question is for you, as it is from the US, from Dave. He is asking, could you please share how emergency management authorities in India engage with the public to raise awareness and prepare communities for natural disasters? Second, an attached question to this is, what kind of outreach programs or initiatives are mostly common?
Thank you. It's a very good questions, and we are doing a lot of things for this purpose. Centrally, as far as the government is concerned, there is a NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, and civil defense. Civil defense, which is the framework, you can say, they are engaging the people, common people, and getting them prepared for any kind of disaster. So there is a direct involvement of the citizen, every citizen, either irrespective of the gender, irrespective of the age group, irrespective of its qualification. So their roles are defined, and the proper training is given, and this regular exercise also happens under the head of jurisdiction of the Director General Civil Defense. So they at framework is exactly same, but we discussed in last webinar at national level, then state level, and the district level. So district level, the teams are working under the head of the civil defense, and they organize the training right from to handle the emergency, to handle the casualties, to help to save the environment in that case, and the salvage. So the framework is it's not independent NGOs are designated for that matter, but rather the civil defense, which is directly monitored by the government. They are organizing the training They are involving the all citizens in that activity and get them ready for handling the any kind of disaster, either it is natural or man-made. Is there any supportive question to this? Or I answered.
Which programs is he asking, sir? What kind
Civil
of
defense program.
Yes, yes. Okay.
We call civil defense program.
Yes.
Hmm.
Fine, sir. Dave, you may connect with Sontake, sir. Jayush Kumar, please. There's a question actually. Can mitigation reduce vulnerability but not hazard? With justification is what Angad is asking. How do cultural beliefs or traditions affect vulnerability to disasters? Is it ethical to force people to relocate from high risk zones even if they don't want to leave? Is what he's asking for, answering from both of you, ma'am and sir. Angad is asking.
So this would not be something that we would consider ethical. When you look at certain kinds of communities, whether they're ethnic communities, whether there are communities of choice, such as the LGBTQ population, you look at the social connections that people have. Generally, if you look at, for example, Hurricane Katrina, there's no place else in the United States that has that same culture as New Orleans, Louisiana. And when they had that disaster, to tell these people that they could no longer live, frankly, in a city that's below sea level, meant that we would have they would have lost their social connections. They would have lost, remember, I mentioned that owning property in America is how you collect economic and you have social mobility. You move through the economic cycle where you start with less and you move by owning property up the economic ladder from poor to working class, working to middle and upper class. As we look at, thank you, as we look at telling people that we are going to take away their property and make them leave, they will lose, we won't be able to pick them up in most cases and move them somewhere else. They're going to be given a check and told to go find a place. That tends to drive up the cost of housing in the nearby locations to where they're probably looking at a lower level of housing than they had before. They've lost their social connections. And for older people, for single parents, for the LGBTQ population, those communities that are geographically close to them tend to be extremely important in how they exist in their do they have Meals on Wheels? Does somebody pick them up and take them to church? Does somebody help watch your kids after school because their neighbors and their kids go to the same school? When you break those connections, you break their ability to live independently. So we see that, and a lot of what we do in recovery is trying to recreate those connections either where they were or in a new place. And it could take well over a year to do that. So breaking it on purpose is not necessarily going to be the most ethical choice for us. It would be better for us to invest in the community in trying to do the things that, like I showed you in the picture, mitigating and managing water flow, doing things that create, if we can, engineering structures that help to protect them and reinforce them. Out west, we're looking at giant wildfires. So we're looking at pulling back brush and building with more fire resistant things. And actually, some of the newer looks at planning have us building new neighborhoods around old structures, where those old structures are historical in nature and they can't be upgraded because of the conditions for that. But if we build housing around it that is fire resistant, we can create a fire break for those houses, basically creating herd immunity like we look at when we vaccinate populations, but doing it for housing and buildings. So employing our human ingenuity and innovative responses and mitigation elements with structures would make that be unethical if we're able to do that unless there's no other options and people understand and choose to make those kinds of choices.
Sir, would you like to add anything to what ma'am has said just now?
Yeah, I would like to just add thing because his question is very pertinent as far as the Indian scenario is concerned, having the strong cultural belief and all. So that makes it's very challenging, and we have to make the balance between the individual right and the social safety of the society. So there are examples also. The people are aware about in 2004 tsunami. There they had the traditional informations or the knowledge and the belief that when there is a retrieval of the sea and then it will be followed by the tsunami. Whereas some other people who are residing in the coastal area, they refuse to leave that area. So this strong belief on both sides are sometimes helpful and as well as the challenging also. But when the policies are there, these are prepared by large to have the to considering the safety of the society or the community, not as an individual belief in that case.
Thank you, sir.
And one thing, the most important thing, one most important thing, one should not think it's an act of God. Preparation, the preparedness is plays very important role in mitigation.
True, sir. We are actually running short of time. I am just taking one last question, which is asked by Anshu Patel. It is for you, sir. What are the key components of NDMA with relation to hazard optimization for assessment related to hazard?
Hazard optimization and assessment related to the hazard. Actually, hazard, when we talk in terms of the disaster, then the hazards are the tsunami, earthquake, or the flood. These are the hazards, but in which are not in our control, neither could be minimized. Only thing is we have to reduce the exposure. We can limit the exposure of the people to that extent, so that they will be less vulnerable to that hazard. But in case of the hazards, when we say the potential hazard which can cause the harm, there we can optimize based upon its need and the use of that area as well as the quantity. So these are two. Hazard is a common term he has used, but as far as the disaster is concerned, hazard cannot be optimized or reduced. Only we can reduce the exposure of the community or the people to that hazard, and then by that we are reducing the vulnerability. But in case of the hazard, potential hazard, which we store, there we definitely can have the optimization based on its use and the quantity.
Thank you, sir. If the participants wish to connect with the experts, I request the experts to kindly share their email IDs in the chat box so that we can engage in further conversations. I now move ahead with the concluding remarks for the webinar. I request Dr. Supriya David to convey the concluding remarks.
Friends, as we draw this highly engaging and insightful session to a close, it is my privilege to offer the concluding remarks for today's webinar on risk and vulnerability. On behalf of Rashtrasant Tukrojee Maharaj Nagpur University and Pierce College, Washington, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who has made this session a success. Today's discussion brought to light the complex multidimensional nature of risk and vulnerability in the context of disaster management. We explored how risks are not solely determined by hazards, but are shaped by socio-economic, political, and environmental vulnerabilities. The importance of localized, context-sensitive assessments, and how communities, governments, and academic institutions can work collaboratively to build resilience. The thought-provoking insights shared by our distinguished speakers have enriched our understanding and challenged us to rethink traditional approaches to disaster response and preparedness. A special thanks to our eminent speakers and subject matter experts, especially Professor Lenora Borchardt and Professor Anant R, sharing their knowledge and experiences so generously. Your inputs have been invaluable in shaping a comprehensive understanding of the topic. We also express a deep appreciation to the organizing teams for both RTMNU and Pierce College for their seamless coordination, technical management, and behind-the-scenes efforts in bringing this international academic exchange to life. To the participants, your active involvement, questions, and engagement throughout the session reflect the importance of this topic and your commitment to learning and contributing to safer and more resilient communities. This session is a part of the larger series that aims to foster global academic collaboration and promote capacity building in disaster risk reduction. We look forward to continued participation in upcoming lectures that will further explore various facets of disaster management, from early warning systems to community-based resilience strategies. Let us carry forward today's learnings into our academic, professional, and community environments. In understanding and addressing risk and vulnerability, we take a vital step toward protecting lives, livelihoods, and ecosystems. Once again, thank you for being a part of today's webinar. Let this be not just the end of a session, but the beginning of a shared commitment towards a more informed, prepared, and resilient world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You have left no word to say for me as a vote of thanks, as you literally summed up what Dr. Sontake and Lenora ma'am actually delivered. And the engaging participants were indeed very crisp and very pinpointing in their questions, where they wanted to delve into the details of what risk and vulnerability is. I thank each and every one of you for joining this webinar in large numbers. Moreover, I thank Rashtrasanta Tukroji Maharaj, Nagpur University, Nagpur, the organizing committee, the coordinating committee, and Pierce College, USA for coordinating with Nagpur and organizing this webinar series. We look forward to this cooperation in the forward webinars, in the coming webinars as well. The webinar is officially over, and we look forward to your
Koreti
participation.
sir, sorry to interrupt. Koreti sir, sorry to interrupt. Normally we take photographs at last. So,
Okay.
so
Okay.
please request a participant to switch on their video. Who possible
Okay,
to
sir. Fine, fine,
can
fine.
do that.
Fine,
And
sir.
you can reduce the screen size so that you can accommodate the maximum participant there. And please have the screenshot as a photographs.
Sure, sure.
Participant, you can switch on your
Please
video
switch on your
if
cameras,
possible.
if possible.
Please switch on your
Yes.
camera if possible.
The more faces, the better the webinar has been, is what the message will go.
So participant, student, if you can switch on your video, please do it. Okay, you can have the photograph. So I think
Sure, sir.
the Anshu is joining. Anshu Patel, you are in the group? Okay, you can continue.
Few photographs. Yes, I've clicked a few photographs. I'll share those with you, sir.
Okay.
Fine. Now may I declare the webinar is over, sir, with your permission.
Yeah. Thank you. You can declare as a host.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all the participants. Your contribution and your participation is very valuable to us. We look forward to your engaging participation in the upcoming webinars. Have a great day and good night.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night, everywhere.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.